The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Let's listen as Lorraine LaPointe, coach, therapist, educator, speaker, and founder of Head Heart Synergy, brings together another enlightened guest to inspire and motivate us to move forward, achieve our dreams and desires, so that we experience midlife awakening.
And I'm your host, Lorraine LaPointe. Today we'll enjoy another candid conversation that reveals how to bring back a sense of balance and how to find forward focus. Today, take just a few moments to join us as we explore the possibilities and the perspectives that provide us with greater inner peace, power, passion, and purpose. Because that's what I call living at the edge of fulfillment in a midlife awakening.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Lorraine LaPointe, and it's my passion to guide women like us into going beyond the edge of fulfillment as we hold this safe and sacred space today to explore living with more peace, power, passion, and purpose. And you can think of me as your guide, the guide who helps women in the second half of life to come home to themselves, so that we can move beyond that edge. And because we want to discover new possibilities and new perspectives so that we can more effectively help others and have a greater impact in the world. And so for those of you who are watching live, hello. If you're on YouTube or other social media, please help us out by clicking that subscribe button or that little bell if you can find it. Or if you're on other social media, you can like, or you can heart, or you can comment, or later on maybe even share if you're on a platform like Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that. In this show, we encourage your participation. So if you hear something that is inspirational for you, then just pop a hashtag, the hashtags, and the word nugget, and then a statement of what you're finding really interesting. And that really helps us to know what's valuable for you. And you can also ask questions. Somewhere there should be an opportunity for you to jump into a chat or a comment box. And again, use the hashtag and the word question so that we know it's a question. And you can help us shape this program into something that's really most useful to you. And for those who are watching on the podcast or the replay, we appreciate your hearts and likes and comments and shares as well. And we'll reach out and get to know you also. So wonderful to see you here today. Today you're in the right place at the right time, and because we have a special contest. Today we're going to draw for a $50 Amazon gift card. At least you'll be eligible. So let me tell you what the rules are. All you need to do is simply listen throughout the broadcast. And there'll be 5 secret words. Don't worry, I'll tell you what they are when they come up. At the end of the podcast, so don't put them in the chat when you hear them at first. I'll ask you at the end. At the end of the podcast, we'll ask you to put all 5 words in, and then we'll randomly draw a winner from the entries. So, and we'll announce whoever won the gift card next week. So remember, don't put the words in until I ask you at the end. And you've already heard the first word. The first word to keep track of is the word fulfillment, because you are listening and watching The Edge of Fulfillment on W4WN.com radio and Talk for TV. So you may be here today because you feel called to a greater sense of self-discovery. Like it's time to come home to yourself. And there's a second word. So you might want to jot that one down. The word home is the second secret word. You may be tired of thinking, here's the one I love. What do I want to be when I grow up? Or the other one that's one of my favorites is that all there is. Some days are just like that. Or perhaps you're giving so much to so many for so long. You really wonder, like, when's it going to be my turn? It's okay. You're not alone. You may just have an inner knowing that you want to find that lightness and joy that existed before the heavier, uncomfortable stuff got in the way. And your mission today, should you choose to accept it, is to listen for the inspirational ideas and thoughts and feelings from me and from my guest, who will meet in just a few moments, and to mindfully move forward beyond the edge of fulfillment. I feel like we're all sitting just on that edge. So that's your mission today. Listen and then see what resonates for you to help you move beyond the edge. As some of you may know, my background includes 30 years as an educational leader. I was a principal and a teacher, both in elementary schools. And that reminds me, my friend Angela sent me something today that really resonated for me. She said, "I bet you didn't think in elementary school that when you were learning to avoid the cooties, that those skills would come in handy as you got older." So I thought that was really cute, considering everything that we're going through at the moment. And although I love that career, my work now lives at the intersection of logic and imagination, as intuitive perception meets rational analysis, and we can create that wonderful synergy for living. And that's what I want for you too, is that sense of like squeezing the juice out of life. And there's our third word, squeeze. So now you've had those three. And I believe that we crave more peace, more power, more passion, more purpose. And, we're born fully equipped when we come in to fulfill whatever it is that our life's plan was designed for. And often through no fault of our own, we simply lose the connection to who we truly are. And in this show, we enjoy connecting with guests and with you to share insights. Our guests often have been through great challenges, so they've gone from challenge to triumph, and they found some really interesting ways to create more fulfillment in their life. And so for millennia, we've shared our stories sitting around the campfire. And so in this show, in that same tradition, people are going to listen and participate in the program because what you have to say is important. And we know that people are ready to live differently. So I'd like to start today's show with pulling a card. And I have my oracle cards from Seven Energies here. So I'm just going to give a quick shuffle and pull a card. And the card we have today, I'll see if I can show you on here, is called The Power of Purpose. So let's find out what that's all about. The power of purpose. There comes a time when you realize you're destined for something that is yours and yours alone. You'll discover it's not necessarily what you thought it would be, and it has nothing whatever to do with what anyone else wants or seems to want of you. An uncanny conviction takes hold from somewhere deep and true, and right now, you're invited to step into a new, empowered sense of authentic purpose. Just keep moving the blocks to your essential self, and your purpose will find you. What a wonderful thing to know. So that's what I'd like for you today, is to get that inspiration and to be living closer to your purpose. So we're going to take a little break, and if you can listen in the break, and then you come on back to W4WN, and radio and talk for TV, and we'll be right back. And here we are. Welcome back. Let's just recap here on The Edge of Fulfillment, the show on W4WN Radio and Talk for TV. And today we're running a little contest. If you haven't heard, to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And we've already had 3 of the 5 special words. So you'll hear 5 special words throughout this broadcast that you need to put in the comments, not now, but at the end of the show when I ask you. And that will make you eligible for winning the contest. So don't add them yet. Okay. But if you're just coming in now, let me recap for you. The first 3 words were fulfillment, home, and squeeze. Okay. And continuing listening for the other 2 words to the end of the show. And we'll start this segment by welcoming our guest. Our guest is Dean Piper. And now Dean is known as an international radio and podcast personality. He's called the Pipeman. I've been told, though, that the Pipeman personality is not allowed on W4WN. So we'll be watching that, Dean. Dean's main live radio show is called The Adventures of Pipeman, which it's an anchor show on W4CY and K4HD radio. And he has the slogan of where who knows and anything goes. I think that's why he's Pipeman can't be on W4WN. I don't know. We'll have to ask him in a moment. The Adventure of Pipeman has recently been ranked number 5 top radio show podcast in the world. So thanks for being with us today, Dean.
Hello. How are you?
Awesome. And it's so good to see you. And thank you for taking the time to be here today, because I know that you're a super busy guy.
Absolutely. And, I love your room that you're in. Me too. Like, I don't even need a green screen because I have, my background without a green screen. I don't know if you can really see, but basically we're surrounded by water right now, like we're on an island.
Oh, how beautiful. That's awesome. And
because I am on an island, so it's not right.
I was going to say Pipeman's been placed on an island.
Yeah, I'm in the pipe cave. It's called the Pipe Cave.
So do you want to say a couple of words about why Pipeman's not allowed on W4WN? Or is that a dangerous thing to ask?
Well, see, Pipeman is it's kind of like any character. You got the real person, then you have the alter ego. And, so Pipeman is the alter ego on the radio. Dean is the real me. But you just really never know what you're going to get with Pipeman. And it could be quite offensive and fun and, funny at the same time. But, you just never know. It can go quite awry. Let's put it that way.
Well, I know Dean, and I really like Dean. So I'm really glad that you've shown up with Dean. And if Pipeman sneaks in there just a little bit, we'll forgive him.
Yeah, sometimes when the mic is on, I have to hold Pipeman back. It's like, because the mic turns on, it's kind of like how I describe it. There's, like in some of these superhero shows, there's some of these metahumans that, when something happens, it makes them change into their other form or whatever. Well, that's what happened when the mic comes on. Then Dean kind of gets usually shoved aside because Pipeman is a little more aggressive, and then Pipeman comes. So on a show that's on, so the audience knows, I own multiple radio stations, one of which is what we're on, and TV station. So this station that we're on is W4WN Radio, which is the Women for Women network. So that's kind of why Dean has to kind of get strong at this point and overpower Pipeman and keep him in the background. But on W4CY Radio, or one of our other stations, and K4HD Radio, or other stations, Pipeman is allowed to run rampant.
I recently heard an interview that Pipeman gave with a band member from Crass, and I was anticipating some crassness. But what I actually heard was some really deep and meaningful stuff about revolution of the heart, and how the times that we're in right now have really allowed people to get back in touch with who they truly are, especially during that lockdown period and the times when, you know, there's an awful lot of artists and people that some of us aren't even aware of out there who can't do what they normally do. And so they're finding different ways in their lives to bring fulfillment by getting back in touch with who they are. And your guest was bang on the money as he talked about that. And then you had another guest, Lilith, who mentioned something about that as well, about being an artist and being in touch with who she really was. Did you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And so I just want to say too, like, so everybody knows that it's listening or watching that doesn't know what Crass is. Crass is a iconic anarchy punk band from the 70s and 80s up until now. You know, basically of the times of bands like the Sex Pistols. And I say that because just about everybody knows the Sex Pistols. And what people don't realize about punk rock music is that punk rock music, and you probably heard it during the interview where we talked about it, and a lot of punks don't really like to admit this, but I have this viewpoint that punk rock is just the evolution of the hippies. Now, most people that don't understand may think that makes no sense, because when they think of hippies, they think of peace, love, and happiness and mellowness. And when they think of punk, they think of anarchy, destruction, mosh pits, circle pits, you know, all this stuff. But it's really, punk is really a misunderstood genre of music, except to the people who are within it. Punk rock music is a statement. And it is usually a statement against, you know, the bad things in the world, or political things that are causing the bad things in the world. Punk rock music, most of the music and most of the people in it stand up for women's rights and are against racism and are, you know, just everything that we're going through right now, they are a voice for. And they're a voice against war too. That's like with what we said about the hippies. It's the same message, just delivered differently. You know, and here's what I found in doing over 2,000 interviews in my career, and a lot of music interviews with music artists. The most intelligent, prolific, philosophical interviews are with the old school punk rockers. You know, you think of these punk rockers as, oh, they look weird. They have, and back before it was even popular, piercings, tattoos, they're scary looking, they have mohawks. But then listen to them open their mouth. They're very well educated. One of the famous punk rock bands of the 90s, The Offspring, the lead singer of the band left the band and put the band on hiatus so he could attend Harvard. You know, a lot of people don't realize these people are very intellectual, and they have a lot of passion for their beliefs. And of course, their voice is having to rise again now, because as much as we think we've progressed, we really haven't progressed at all. And you probably heard that in the interview. It's like the things that bands were singing about in the 80s, we're singing about it again here in 2020. All you got to do is change the names in the songs. The band Crass talked a lot against like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. And now they're talking about their prime minister now and our president now, and things that are going on. And I'm not saying we should be political or pick sides. What I'm saying is wrong is wrong and right is right. It doesn't matter what side it is. And you have to have a voice to stand out and say it. You don't just accept everything. And that's what the whole concept of that is. Now, so Penny Rimba, which was one of the guests, there were two of them that are from Crass. He is like, as you could tell, it was one of my longer interviews because he was just a wealth of philosophical information that is just helpful to the world right now. And that's the point. People think punk rock music is a negative message. It is one of the most positive messages. Same with heavy metal music. The problem is most people misunderstand it, don't really understand the lyrics, don't understand the music and what it's doing. But what it's really doing is, listen, when we're teenagers going through all this stuff we're going through right now, we're angry. We're not full of peace and love and happiness as a teenager. So that's how the evolution came to music like punk rock and heavy metal, because it gave these teenagers an outlet for their anger that was healthy, instead of things like riots and upheaval and destruction and all that. It all remains in a friendly family atmosphere. People in the punk and the metal community is like a family. So I you brought up Lilith. Well, she is in a metal band. So yeah. It was punk and it's metal and it's both ends. They kind of walked a similar line. But as you could tell, like, it's funny with Lilith, one of the comments I made on the interview, and I'm sure you heard, was, she's got this brutal voice because it's like a death metal voice. But if anybody's ever heard that, it's pretty brutal. It's like people saying like, like that, and
then she's sweet when she speaks. Oh my goodness, yep. She's so sweet.
Yep, she was very soft-spoken, and that's generally what happens. It's pretty amazing, but the artistry and the person go hand in hand, but they go separate sometimes too. So the thing is these music interviews that I've been doing lately, I think are so well needed in the times we're in right now for two reasons. One is music's the best therapy. Two is that we have so much going on right now that and listen, music artists also address the mental issues that are going on with everything that's going on, and just in general, the things that society likes to make us hide behind, and just how we're feeling. And that kind of music and that kind of interaction gives the people the ability to know that they're not alone. And we'll get through this together.
I noticed, Mike, that our listeners are commenting, and they're very much on track with what you're saying as well. And I must be honest, I am not someone who listens to punk rock. I think if you took out the music piece and it was just the lyrics, I might like it. But that might be a bit more of a reflection on, I'm more the hippie, talk about peace and love myself from that generation, because I was born in the 60s. So I love that stuff. But I noticed that there's some great comments from Nancy and some from Angeline and that type of thing, talking about exactly what you're saying. So,
well, and the funny thing is the punks are about peace, love, and happiness, but they just realized that message didn't work.
Yeah.
So they had to have a louder voice and a more shocking voice for people to stand up and pay attention. And that That's where the evolution. Yeah. And that's where I say the evolution, because you know what? The hippies, and I consider myself, for anybody that looks at my description on Facebook, I am a liberal conservative punk metalhead, a hippie professional businessman, because I am all these things. And I think that's something people need to realize when they're on the edge of fulfillment, because the fact is we are multiple people. We are multiple personalities, and we like to compartmentalize, and we like to take sides and all this. And, it's like, I'll bring up something that's interesting: midlife crisis. First of all, why do we call everything a crisis? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, actually, that's why I call it midlife awakening.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's not a crisis. It's an opportunity to awaken to who we are and try something new and get in touch with our passion and our power. I mean, that's why the 4 P's, right? Peace, power, passion, and purpose. You have those 4 P's, you are awake and you are feeling fulfillment in your life.
Well, what I love about that is the awakening part goes right in line, without even before us even knowing each other, of my philosophy of what midlife crisis really is. Because it happened one day when my daughter said it to me. She's like, "Dad, you're going through midlife crisis." And it wasn't like I was doing anything like they define as that. But here's what happens. Okay. So when we're a teenager, okay, we are a certain personality and we have a very strong identity. But the difference is we're anti-society, we're anti-authority, we're anti our parents. The only things that matter are our friends. And we're seeking their approval, nobody else's. We don't want the approval of authorities or society in general or our parents. We want the approval of our friends. So we are a certain personality at that stage in our life. And then as we grow into adulthood, now we have to get the acceptance of the people we didn't want the acceptance before. So it goes the exact opposite. Now we're trying to prove we're not a kid anymore. We're trying to prove to the older generation that we're as wise and mature as they are. We're trying to prove to our parents that we can do this. We're trying to prove to our bosses that we can do this. We're trying to do all these different things that were all the things that we were against as a teenager. So what we do is we take that teenage us and we bury it somewhere deep inside us. It never is gone, but we bury it very deeply. We become this different person. And that's definitely like me. Okay, when I was a teenager, it's funny because even though I was very about my responsibilities and I worked like 2 jobs and went to school and, I was like an honor student stuff, but I also had hair down the middle of my back, wore spikes, a leather jacket, denim vest with patches all over it. And I was very like into the shock value, when adults would see it, like, "Oh my God, look at him." And then when I became that young adult, it was, and you would never catch me with a shirt with with a collar on it, much less, wearing a suit. Then as an adult, I ended up wearing a suit every single day. So teenage friends of mine saw me in a suit and they're like, what happened to you? But then adult friends of mine never could imagine that teenage kid of me. Okay.
I call that parts, actually. I'm a parts therapist. And so that's so much in line with what I connect with my, the people that I help is finding those different parts, because they all have a voice. We all have voices in our minds, and quite often we hear the critical one. And that often drives us, but all those different parts that you've talked about, the teenage part, the part that I call the practicing adulthood, that one that, dresses up in the suit when they're young and tries to be an adult. And then you have the more grown-up parts of yourself, which are, also important. But you're right. Yeah. Sometimes often we bury the parts that are uncomfortable.
Right. Now next step, we become a parent. So now we become person or mother person, in my case, father, and that's a whole different personality. Like there's things that my kids, as they were growing up, now they're adults, it's different. They could never imagine about me because you have to set this, in my opinion, you have to set this certain role of who you are and who you are to them. And so that's the society's rules too. So every step of your life before midlife crisis, your rules are not yours. They're everybody else's rules and society's rules. And you're living by these rules. And then you wake up one day after your kids are grown, they're out of the house, you went through all these things, you've already proved yourself in business, you've proved yourself to everybody else. You don't have anything to prove to anybody anymore at this point. And then you're like, who made these rules? Like you, for the first time in your life, you're like, who made these rules? And then you finally figure out, and this is what I call midlife fulfillment instead of crisis. And what it is you finally figure out who you really are. This is your awakening. You find out who you really are, and you figure a way to make teenage you, adult you, parent you, and every other you that you've been in your lifetime to coexist instead of them all living separately. Because throughout your life, that in those parts, you lived separately. Now you finally become the real you that has all of it, so people that in adulthood start seeing stuff that you're doing in what they call midlife crisis, that's part teenage you you're bringing back to the surface, but they think that you're doing something bad. No, you're just finally living on your own terms and living life to the fullest the way you want to live it, because you've already lived your life for everybody else. It's time for you to live for you.
Yeah, and Nancy had a really good question just then. She said, and who makes these rules? And
and that's what I said to myself. Exactly.
It reminds me about the rules that we are experiencing at the moment. I mean, some of them are helpful and some of them are just silly. Yeah. But I mean, we won't necessarily get into that, but I mean, quite often who makes the rules? It seems, well, when we're little, you mentioned roles, and when we're little in families, we are given our role. Whether you are the golden child or whether you're the scapegoat or whether you are the sickly child or whether you're the rebel. You talk about that teenage rebel. Well, sometimes the children are given those roles.
Oh, no doubt. Society gives us that role.
And then they give us the role. So we learn to play the role, or we accept the role and we learn to play into it. And then society says, oh, well, if you're that role, this is what you need to do, or this is how you need to be. And then again, we get another layer on top of a layer on top of a layer until we are in our midlife. And I call it the second half. And we suddenly go, wait a minute, I don't want to keep going this way.
Yeah.
There's more to life than living with rules and rules.
It's funny too, because we're given these rules from the very beginning. I mean, think of this. And we're giving these roles from the very beginning. Think of this. The terrible twos. Like you tell the kid before the kid's two about the terrible twos. Listen, as a parent of 4 kids and I have 8 grandchildren, I'm here to tell you right now, whoever says the terrible twos hasn't hit 16 yet.
That's practice for 16.
I mean, like the terrible twos is easy peasy. I'll take my 2-year-old grandchildren all day compared to the 16-year-old. 16-year-old, you can keep this 16-year-old, self included. I want to address a couple of the comments that I saw. The first one I want to address is Nancy said, when my son discovered me as a human, he was thrilled. And I'm bringing that one up because when my kids became adults and they found out certain parts of me, their response was specifically word for word, oh, thank God you're human. because to them, I was like this total straight edge, never did anything wrong, because that's the role model that you choose to be. And then I want to address Marie made a comment. She said, I think that is why we like Halloween, because grown-ups get to dress up in our favorite hero costumes so we can let our inner child come out and play again.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely 100% true. And I'll go a step further. That's what I loved about being a parent. That's what kind of stinks about empty nest syndrome, because when you're a parent, you can do all this kid stuff without anybody looking at you weird, thinking you're like some weirdo or creepo, like, oh, good. I can go to a theme park and not feel like people think you're weird because some 50-year-old dude's going to a theme park or going to any of the different kid stuff, or even watching certain kids programs. Like some of them, they were actually pretty good to watch. I remember though, my dad he started young at 11 years old. He like stopped me from watching cartoons. He's like, you're too old for that. You're too old for that. And that's the society that we live in. So then, yes, as parents, we get to like kind of live vicariously through our children in certain respects and be able to do things like dress up for Halloween and do all this stuff that adulting is considered stupid, and I love that word adulting that the younger generations use now. Like seriously,
it's not a positive word. It's not a nice thing to be called adulting.
Like seriously, like it's a job.
It kind of reminds me though of when I lived in Australia for a year. The Australians and I mean, I don't know if we have any Aussies listening, but I loved living in Australia because they seem to be more in touch with their inner child. And the kids there don't wait for Halloween to dress up. They dress up anytime they feel like it. And that seemed to be so much more freeing. We in North America actually put rules around when our kids can dress up.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And yes, there are probably Aussies listening because we actually also have a radio station in Australia as well. And we have multiple Australian shows. So, yes.
Awesome. So
yeah,
can you
can
you hold that thought, Dean? Because I'm just thinking that we should probably take a little break in case somebody, is listening and they need a little break. So we'll go to break and stay tuned because you are listening to Dean Piper on W4WN Radio and Talk for TV. So we'll be right back. Awesome. Welcome back. So to recap, we've had some really great conversations so far, all about growing up and whether we need to be grown up and all about, Dean, we were talking about roles and that kind of thing. And I just want to let our listeners know on W4WN that we're also running a contest, or remind that we're running a contest in this episode. So we've already talked about the 3 secret words, and hopefully you were here to hear them because we've gone over them twice. And you mentioned the 4th secret word just before the break. You mentioned the word live, like the way we live. And that's the 4th secret word, is the word live. So jot that down, listeners. And there'll be a 5th one coming up. Don't put them in the chat right now. Hang on to them until I ask you closer to the end of the show. And And then you can be eligible to win the $50 Amazon gift card. So you were just going to make a great point before we went to break, Dean, and I cut you off, and I'm sorry, but do you want to continue?
Don't be sorry. You know what? As owner of the network, I was very impressed, because I'm going to say right here live on the air, okay, guests will hijack your show. So a good show host knows how to cut them off and keep the show going the way it should. So that was a big kudos right there.
Awesome. It's kind of like being a principal when you've got somebody in your office that just, they're telling you your life story and you really want to hear them, but the bell's about to ring and the buses are showing up. Life gets in the way. So
it's funny you should say that, because exactly what I thought about during the break was, that was so Principal Lorraine of you.
That's one of my roles.
and again, tying in with the role thing, I was thinking about the whole concept of the role of principal and person. I won't say student, I'll say person. What do I mean by that? So me as a teenager, going to a principal's office is absolute hell, okay? That's the person you fear and all this stuff. Here's the funny thing, though, and any other parents out there, tell me if you feel the same way, but I know with all four of my kids, no matter what stage of life I was in, because obviously it was multiple stages, and going to the principal's office for my kids, whether it's good, bad, or whatever, whether it was a parent-teacher conference or whatever it was, I still had that feeling walking into the school, I don't want to go to the principal's office. So that's how strong that role is, that I could be 30-something years old and be nervous in the school when I'm the one that's the parent. So that's I think it happens for a lot of people. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and that actually brings up something that we were talking about before, about being given roles and being forming ourselves and behaving in ways that we anticipate or expected. And I often saw that in my role as principal. Parents would come in and perhaps they were great students, or perhaps they struggled in school, but there was a certain way that they felt that they needed to behave because I had the label, the role given to me. And we often see that in life. And earlier we were talking about punk rockers and bands and that kind of thing. And sometimes we need to break those molds, if I can call it that, or that state of mind, in order to find out who we truly are and find our purpose so that we can live into that. Because people are people. I remember my mom saying at one point when I said, I'm really scared to talk to somebody, she said, they're just people. They have the same worries, the same concerns. And you talked about that about kids. Terrible twos are not terrible twos, and neither are teens. Teens aren't terrible. They just have something to say and they have difficulty saying it.
Well, they're creating their own identity and they're trying to become themselves. And in that, there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of resistance, because it's you're neither here nor there when you're a teenager. You're not a kid, but you're not an adult either. So you're in this kind of purgatory. And that's where that frustration comes in. And you're just trying to find yourself, and nobody will let you be yourself, because it's you have to be this thing for other people, and you don't even have the chance to figure out who you are and do what you do. Maybe if we allow teenagers to do that, then maybe they wouldn't need to figure out who they were at the edge of fulfillment. They could be fulfilled back then. I want to address something that Marie said, because it is a pet peeve of mine. And she said that one of the things she learned growing up is that people would put labels on you based on your personality, behaviors, or if you had a disability.
Yep.
I absolutely hate labels. I hate sides. I hate division. And that's what labels do. They divide. Labels, it's a pet peeve of mine, because we put labels on everything now for people. Everything. A person is no longer a person. They're either ADD, or they're bipolar, or they're on the spectrum, or they're this, or they're a Republican, or they're a Democrat, and that brings me to, we have an election coming up, and regardless, I don't care who's in the election, who wins, who loses, but why do people go into a voting booth and just vote red or blue all the way down the line? They don't even know the people's names. That's what I mean. Why do we need these labels? Why do you have to be a liberal? Why do you have to be a conservative? Like I said earlier in the show, I consider myself a liberal conservative. And do you know how many people come at me? And funny enough, a lot of them are female and say, how can you be liberal and conservative? Pick a side. Why do I have to pick a side?
It's interesting that you say that, because the labels actually take us back to the root of like our beginnings of personality, where you say, I am this, I am not that. And so from our very roots, we start to segregate one thing over another. The problem, I think, happens when we add judgment as something is good or bad. Not that I am this, I am not that, because that defines our personality and defines us, but putting a judgment on it. And I'm in Canada, so we aren't into the middle of an election. And I feel my heart goes out to many of the people that are south of the border at the moment, because this is a very tumultuous time. And I'd love to get into that conversation a little more with you, but we're getting really close to the end of the show. And I do want to mention that Nancy actually popped up the last secret word. The last secret word was purpose. So jot that one down. And as we wind down, in a few moments, I'll give our audience the cue to go ahead and start popping those 5 secret words. Actually, you might as well now start popping those 5 secret words that you've heard throughout the show into the chat. We'll collect those and put each person's comment into the ballots for see who wins that $50 gift card. So, Dean, at this point, we're close to wrapping up. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you haven't yet been able to bring forward, or perhaps talk to our listeners about how they can contact you if there's more information?
Yeah, well, first of all, do you have another 8 hours?
I wish I did.
That might not cover it, though.
Hey, you're the executive producer. How much time do you want to give me?
Anyway, I mean, bottom line is, here's my viewpoint right now, right here and now, for the whole world, not just the United States. We are one race, the human race. We are human beings and individuals. We're not on sides. We're not labels. We are the people that should live life to the fullest every single day. COVID is a perfect example of that. Okay. We never would have expected it. How many people are like, ooh, what if life changes forever? I didn't get to do this. And that's why you live life every day to the fullest. And I also want to say, we're going through this time of COVID. Okay. I want everybody to remember, back in 1918, we had a pandemic. It was exactly the same scenario as now. Go back and read the papers. Everything we are going through now is very similar to then. The division, whether to wear masks, not masks, the conspiracy theories, all that. But here's also what happened. We had the roaring 20s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd love you to hang on to that thought for our next show, because otherwise we're going to run out of time and they're going to cut us off.
You're right. And I'm going to authorize, as the owner, that we have 10 more seconds of me to say, so live life to the fullest. It will get better. And if you want to have your own radio show or your own podcast or whatever, or market your business or whatever, if you want to market the business, contact Lorraine. If you want to have your own radio show or podcast, contact Lorraine. She'll connect me with you, and we will make things happen. Back to you, Lorraine.
Awesome. So much. Thanks, Dean. And thank you for taking the time to come on here. And thanks to our listeners for listening at W4WN. And I just want to remind you that your mission for this show was to mindfully move forward in your midlife awakening and move beyond the edge towards fulfillment. And I'll see you next week at this time, Friday, 10 a.m., right here in Eastern Time, W4WN, and Talk for TV. Thanks, Dean. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
My honor.
And we'll see everyone next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.